And Spain are your world champions!
Grandpa, what will we remember?
Probably not what they put on the trophy. The first thing that stayed was not a goal. It was the roar of the Azteca. South Korean and Mexican supporters finding each other through songs, flags, and noise. Two sets of colors, two languages, two crowds that had come for different teams and somehow ended up inside the same celebration. A few days later, it was the Tartan Army, spilling through narrow streets, their songs jumping from one alley to the next, leaving behind laughter, noise, and orange cones balanced on every statue tall enough to hold one. And somewhere else entirely, the Viking Row. Hundreds of Norwegians sitting together, leaning forward, pulling back, moving like one body, as if a whole country had decided to row in the same direction. Before this World Cup gave us its great matches, it had already found its voice. A crowd can do more than make a country heard, though. Sometimes it changes how the world looks at that country afterward. And being remembered is not the same as being expected. Norway had waited 28 years to come back to a World Cup. When they arrived, it was almost as visitors. A country returning to a stage it had nearly forgotten existed. Then they beat Brazil. Then they reached the quarterfinals. By the time it ended, nobody was calling Norway lucky to be there anymore. People were expecting to see them again. Morocco's task was harder in a way. 4 years earlier, they had been the surprise everyone loved. This time, surprise was not going to be enough. They had to prove that what they had done before was not an accident. Another run into the last 8 settled the question. The world stopped asking whether Morocco could compete with the biggest nations. It simply assumed they could. That is when a country really changes status. Not after one extraordinary tournament, but when extraordinary starts to feel normal. Cabo Verde changed something faster than that. For years, people had argued about letting more countries into the tournament. More teams, more matches, more nations being given a place on the largest stage. Then, Cabo Verde gave that argument a human answer. They gave the expanded World Cup a memory it could never have produced without them. Against Argentina, they simply refused to go away. And when their second goal curled into the top corner to make it 2-2, the whole match tilted. It was not over, but it already felt bigger than the result. For a few minutes, people quietly believed they might be watching the greatest upset the World Cup had ever produced. Argentina survived in the end. Cabo Verde did not complete it. But by then, the score was no longer the only thing that mattered. A match does not always wait for the final whistle to become a memory. The best ones start turning into memories while they are still being played, by making the impossible feel close enough to touch. That is what happened at the Azteca. When England went down to 10 men against Mexico, the stadium felt it instantly. Every Mexican attack grew louder. Every loose ball seemed to be pulled forward by the crowd itself. For a while, the impossible stopped feeling like a fantasy and started feeling like something the stadium could drag into existence through sheer noise. England held on. Mexico did not finish the job. But the Azteca had everyone believing they would. England against France did something similar, from the opposite direction. At halftime, France were 4 goals behind. Some scorelines feel difficult. This one felt finished. Then France scored. Then again. Then a third time. At 4-3, the whole match flipped inside out. The question was no longer whether France could complete the comeback. It was whether England could survive it. Millions of people were watching the same screen, thinking the same thing. They are actually going to do this. England won 6-4. But nobody will remember it for the 10 goals alone. They will remember those few minutes when the impossible stopped feeling impossible. Nights like that do not happen on their own, though. Somewhere inside most of them, one player decides not to accept the ending everyone else already has. Kylian Mbappe had been doing that since he was a teenager. A champion at 19, a hat-trick in a final at 23. And now, another tournament where the goals never really stopped, until he stood alone as the leading scorer in the history of the competition. France did not lift the trophy this time, but Mbappe still left his fingerprints on the whole summer. He had become something most players never do. A name that no longer belonged to one World Cup. It belonged to the World Cup itself. Mr. World Cup. France did not lift the trophy this time, but Mbappe still left his fingerprints on the whole summer. He had become something most players never do. A name that no longer belonged to one World Cup. It belonged to the World Cup itself. Mr. World Cup. Every tournament also needs someone to announce himself. This one got that from Erling Haaland. Against Brazil, on a stage finally large enough to measure him properly, he scored twice and helped carry Norway to a historic victory and a place in the quarterfinals. It was more than a great performance. It was the moment his power finally found the stage it had been waiting for. Jude Bellingham did not ease into the tournament the way some players do. He went after it from the first whistle, scoring more goals from midfield than anyone before him at a single World Cup. He played as though, sooner or later, every match would offer him a moment to change it. And then there was Lionel Messi, whose World Cup story was supposed to be finished already. He had lifted the trophy 4 years earlier. He was 39. There seemed to be nothing left for this tournament to ask of him. Then Argentina were falling apart against Egypt, and the ball found his left foot anyway. One touch to control it, one gap to see, one finish. And the comeback started from there. In the semi-final against England, Argentina were behind again. And again, both goals began at his feet. 2 matches that were slipping away, both pulled back by the same player. The world thought it had already said goodbye to. Argentina did not keep the trophy this time either. But Messi left the tournament with one more reminder. Some players do not stop finding magic just because the story is supposed to be over. The record books will remember Spain. They will remember the score, who scored, and who lifted the trophy at the end. But those who watched this World Cup will remember more than that. The chants that filled the streets, the countries that made themselves impossible to overlook, the nights when the impossible came close enough to touch, and the faces that gave all of it a shape. The record books will remember how it ended. We will remember what lasted.